Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. Welcome to this week's edition of Kibbitzing with Kagan, brief conversations with people I find fascinating. With me today is Meredith Weisel from the Anti-Defamation League. Meredith is a longtime friend and activist and just a leader in all good things. So Meredith, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today.
Thank you. This is absolutely wonderful. I am so excited to be here. And as you said, longtime friends, and worked on a lot of issues over the years together.
We are going to try to cover a lot of those, but we want to focus mostly on the ADL. I want to start, though, with your childhood. So you got a BA at AU, you got your law degree in Delaware, but tell us about your childhood. Did you grow up in a Jewish home? Where did you grow up? Did you have siblings? Give us a sense of how you began.
Sure. So I actually grew up in Long Island, New York. My parents are both born and raised in the Bronx, and in the 70s did the move out to Long Island. So that's where I was raised until I was 17 when I came to DC for college. And I've been here ever since. Both my parents are Jewish. My dad was actually raised in an Orthodox home, and my mother, as she would say many times, she was Jewish by birth. She really wasn't any affiliation necessarily. And then I was raised in the conservative movement in the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism. I have a younger sister who's about 2 years and 8 months, to be exact, younger than me. And it was a wonderful childhood. I loved where I grew up. I was very, very active in our synagogue in USY, which is the United Synagogue Youth.
Yep.
And really spent a lot of time kind of getting to know myself, and just learning about the Jewish community and what was important to me. And then really when I left is when I got even more involved.
Amazing. So your career, you started a law firm, but then you went to the realtors, which is where I first met you a million years ago. Had a consulting firm, worked with a consulting firm. Then you went to the JCRC, the Jewish Community Relations Council. What did you there, and what are you proudest of that you accomplished there?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I didn't exactly have a full linear path. I've always loved the law, and I've loved the political environment and just getting involved with that. And when I went to the JCRC, I was asked in a way to mesh what I would call my professional and personal life. I was always very active in the Jewish community, doing work with Federation and just really kind of, my synagogue and getting involved with things. And then I was asked if I would take that expertise of working on the legal aspects and working in the political environment and the legislature and combining that with my Jewish experience. So that's really what I did when I went to the JCRC. And from there was very focused, particularly on Maryland, where I now live and have lived for a long time, and understanding the players in the legislature, state level, the local level, and just bringing that experience there and advocating for issues that were important to the Jewish community and beyond.
So it was probably a pretty smooth transition almost 4 years ago in 2019 when you went to ADL, the Anti-Defamation League. So let's not assume that everybody who's watching this knows what the ADL is. So why don't you give us a sense of its history, its priorities, what its mission is?
Yeah, great question. And we do get that a lot. People know the acronym ADL. They don't necessarily know the full grasp of the work. And funny story to kind of start this is many people are more familiar now with the Anti-Defamation League because of Broadway. And Parade, which just closed on Broadway, is actually the story of Leo Frank, which is actually how ADL got started. 1913. So we're now a 110-year-old organization, and the mission has been the exact same.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Leo Frank was a Jewish business person who was falsely accused and murdered. Go ahead. So why don't you?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So no. That's a good quick summary. So what I was going to say is, so the mission of ADL was to stop the defamation of the Jewish people, which is really fighting anti-Semitism, and securing justice and fair treatment for all, because Leo Frank was falsely accused of raping, unfortunately, a very young girl around 13 years old. and he was convicted, and then his sentence essentially was commuted, and he went from essentially being sentenced to death to life in prison once they looked at the facts of the case. And when that happened, he was lynched by a mob, and it fueled anti-Semitism and racism and other forms of hate. And so the ADL was essentially formed to fight back on this. Anti-Semitism, which is really the main thing we work on, has been around for millennia, as you know, and that's why we have a mission working on both anti-Semitism and combating forms of hate and extremism in any way, shape, or form. And that's the main thing that ADL does.
So anti-Semitism, is at an all-time high.
Yep.
Tracking began by the ADL in 1979. My statistics show 100% increase in Maryland. Can you give us a sense of what that includes, and how many of the incidents do we have any guess as to whether people are inclined to report? If someone calls someone a dirty Jew, is that an anti-Semitic incident? What is the likelihood of someone, checking in and reporting that?
Yes. So as you mentioned, we've been tracking this since about 1979. That is reported incidents. And you'll hear me say that a lot, reported, because the reality is both ADL, the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, will tell you that most crimes, regardless whether it's a hate crime or not, are underreported. And what we have found is that many people, particularly in marginalized groups, are afraid to report. So what we know, at least reported, is the incidents have continued to increase the past several years. We do see patterns of this throughout history, but Maryland, as you noted, had a close to 100% increase from 2021 to 2022. We don't have statistics yet, obviously, for 2023, but it is tracking about the same. And what we're finding is it is not just incidents of vandalism or harassment. We are seeing physical assaults of individuals, and we are seeing what we like to say incidents online playing out in real life. And we are continuing to see that pattern. Yes. And that is a lot of what we're seeing throughout the country. And I want to also just note, Maryland was 10th in the country for reported level of anti-Semitic incidents. So out of all the states, we were 10th.
So I wonder whether that's because we are the 10th that have the most incidents, or we're just really good reporters, and it could be either or both.
So the Delta, we get asked that question a lot, with incidents being reported in different places. And also, are there more Jewish people? And yes, we certainly have a very large Jewish population here. Yes and no. The Delta is kind of small when you look at the numbers and the data, people who go through this, and they say it's really not necessarily. We just do have a lot of incidents. We tend to have a high number of white supremacist propaganda, which are things like flyers and stickers and sometimes protests. And some of that is proximity to the district, and that plays into it as well.
Columbia.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So to what do you attribute the spike?
Yeah, so it's
like, when did the numbers start trending upward, and what caused it, in your opinion?
Yeah, so there are a variety of factors, and we can't necessarily pinpoint to one thing. We kind of put it in context of a few different things. So social media has changed the entire conversation, and social media can be a wonderful thing, and we can counter it, and we can post pictures of our food and our kids and our cats and our dogs, and it's great. Right. At the same time, we have seen it a place where social media proliferates, which leads to my next comment about the normalization. And we have unfortunately seen elected officials at all levels of government, and we could certainly go and name them, but that's not even important, but who have not used their bully pulpits for good. That's the phrase I would use.
You are a wonderful nonprofit, nonpartisan person, but I'm going to name Donald Trump with his Proud Boys, "The Jews Will Not Replace Us" in Charlottesville. And there were lovely people on both sides of the protests. That's bananas. I mean, so I assume—
And I comment on him too. That is one I will. For the first time in history, ADL actually had commented on a presidential individual and
a current president of the United States.
Yeah, when he was president, we commented on that, but also after the January 6th insurrection, and
Yes.
actually calling for him to resign. So it was the first time in our history as a nonpartisan 501c3 organization, because of the hate-fueled incidents that we saw that led to something like the January 6th insurrection that was filled with anti-Semitism throughout it.
So let's stay on social media for a second,
Sure.
because you brought that up. So just a couple of days ago, and we're taping this right after this happened,
Yeah.
Elon Musk, who purchased Twitter and renamed it X and brought his crazy views and all that. And there is now a trending hashtag, ban the ADL. What the freaky freak is that all about? And how are you combating that campaign effort?
So we, what I will say this, one, I can't comment specifically. You know, we are getting questions from people. You know, he certainly threatened a lawsuit against ADL. We're not going to comment on any pending or possible litigation. But
Sure.
what I will say is there are concerns that we have continued to see hate proliferate, particularly anti-Semitism. And unfortunately, we have seen him and others amplify it on there. And the concern that we have been talking to individuals at Twitter over the years and Facebook and every other social media company out there is that content moderation is important. When you see things like Holocaust denial, saying the Holocaust didn't happen on mainstream social media sites, it's
Right.
concerning. When you see false information saying Jews control the media, Jews control Wall Street, it is playing into anti-Semitic tropes. And we are seeing things like that happening with the hashtag ban the ADL campaign on there. There is a ton of anti-Semitism, and that is concerning on a private social media platform.
So I have so many questions and I'm jumping all around.
That's
So
okay.
when you talk about there is a problem with ignorance. And the numbers of millennials who don't know that 6 million Jews were murdered in the Holocaust or don't know what Auschwitz is, the biggest mass extermination camp, Auschwitz-Birkenau, which is just a powerfully important historical site. And I'm blessed to have had the opportunity to visit. It's very, there are no words. It's sobering, shocking, you know. So can you talk about ignorance and what you think about what could be happening in our schools to educate young people?
Sure, it's an excellent question. And I will note that we talked about my background. When I was 16, I traveled to Poland. I went on a trip with USY, with United Synagogue Youth, to Poland to visit all the concentration camps. And even though I had learned about it in history, being there on site and then being able to come back and tell the story. And I still, when I do trainings now with teenagers, I talk about that and the impact it had. And so ignorance is a huge part of anti-Semitism, certainly. And the issues that we've been seeing, particularly in Montgomery County Public Schools, is a huge part of it. When you hear that a middle school child drew a swastika on a desk and says, oh, I saw it on TikTok and I thought it was funny, we have to ask ourselves, what did we miss? Why did that child not know that symbol? And in middle school, they should know that symbol. So one of the things that ADL has been working really closely on is with MCPS, with throughout all of Maryland.
Montgomery County Public Schools.
Montgomery County Public Schools, yes. Sorry about that. Is that we're looking to see better ways to train faculty, teachers, and so not just the people who are in the classroom, and also students to have a better understanding of anti-Semitism, but not just the Holocaust, throughout history. And the way we phrase it is the Holocaust was the most egregious chapter in the book on anti-Semitism. And we need to understand what happened right before the Holocaust, what happened during and after, and how are we seeing that playing out today. So that's what we need to be teaching, not just in a chapter in World War II, that, hi, the Holocaust was something that was part of it and happened, but what else can we be talking about and understanding things like anti-Semitic tropes and how they're manifesting today and how they've become normalized?
Give a quick example of what you mean by an anti-Semitic trope, just so folks know what
Sure.
that is.
So one of the big ones that people really know the best is power and control. This myth is what I would call it, a trope, saying that Jews control the media.
Wall Street, banks,
Wall
the media,
Street, Congress,
yeah.
Hollywood, and that we are all
We
powerful.
are so damn powerful. Who knew?
Well, and the distinction, and this is what's interesting, and we talk with kids about, and honestly, I've started doing it with adults, is to better understand why that is dangerous, is that when you say that, it becomes that Jews are all powerful and controlling. And that is not the case. And the distinction between anti-Semitism and other forms of hate is that they think Jews are too controlling and too powerful, and we need to be taken down. Versus other marginalized groups, they just think they're already inferior, and Jews are also controlling them. And it's this really awful, just, yes, it's very, very dangerous. And we are seeing kids believing some of that, and that is concerning.
So Meredith, I wonder, I'm assuming that you have experienced anti-Semitism in your life. Can you share with us one story? I'll share with you one of mine.
Yeah, so I certainly experienced it a little bit as a kid and growing up. Honestly, the most powerful incident of anti-Semitism, is how I would phrase it, is when my own synagogue here was vandalized about 8 years ago. Remember? Where I was the person who actually found it, because as you know, I'm a runner and I was out running early in the morning, and I came across my synagogue and it had swastikas all over it and some anti-Semitic slurs. The reason that was the most horrific is because I saw it through my 2 kids' eyes. When they came with me back to the building to clean it up, and to have my children, you know, back 8 years ago experience something like this, that's why it was the most horrific, because it was like, how can this still be happening all these years later? And now we're in 2023 and we're still having some of these incidents.
So first off, if I remember correctly, and you'll correct me if I'm not remembering correctly, the rabbi, it was a young man who was caught, and the rabbi,
18 years old.
The rabbi endeavored to educate rather than just punish and all that, which I thought, the former rabbi, which I thought was really pretty extraordinary, actually. I'm going to tell you one of mine, which is not as hate-filled, but it was just ignorant. And it was, I think, well-intentioned. I think this was a legislative colleague of mine. I used to bring my rabbi every year to give the invocation to the House or to the Senate. And one time after my late rabbi had told a wonderful story and given the invocation, one of my wonderful colleagues and friends looked at me and he said, "Oh, I didn't know you were Jewish. You don't look Jewish. You don't act Jewish." Like, I still don't know how I should have responded, because it was like, wow, what does that mean? And I know he means it as a compliment, but that's so offensive. And it's so ignorant. So anyway, so I think
one little comment on that, if I might. So one of the things that we talk about when we do trainings for the community, and we do trainings, has nothing to do with your faith, your background, for everybody. We talk about intent over impact, or impact over intent. And intent is always important to understand, but the impact, so whether they meant it or not, it's the impact it had on you. And that's the conversation. If it ever happens again, you would want somebody, let me just tell you how those words made me feel. That's an important thing when it comes to confronting anti-Semitism and any form of hate, to be honest.
This was a long, long time ago too. And I still, all right, move on. Israel. There are a lot of people, there are a lot of Jews. I really struggle with Benjamin Netanyahu and his policies that I think are so dreadfully misguided. There's some people who sort of get all bollocksed up with anti-Semitism versus anti-Israel policy. Could you speak to that?
Sure. So the way that we phrase it is, so Zionism, let's just start with that. Zionism is the belief in the state of Israel. It should exist. Jewish people have the right of self-determination, first and foremost. Unfortunately, we see anti-Israel activity, rhetoric sometimes conflates and becomes anti-Semitic. Not all. You want to criticize the Israeli government, criticize any government, United States, China, I mean, pick a country, that's
Sure.
fine. But when you conflate it and blame all Jews for the responsibility of the Israeli government, many of us who do not vote in the Israeli elections, you're bordering on anti-Semitic activity. We also at the ADL believe that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism because at its core, anti-Zionism believes Israel should not exist. And that in and of itself can be anti-Semitic. And so it's criticism of the government, please, more power to you. The Jewish people are probably one of the biggest critics, more than anybody. But be careful the phrasing that you're using and saying the Israel lobby or all of Israel's money, is controlling the United States government. You've now gone into anti-Semitic activity.
Right. And just to be clear, I am a very proud, patriotic American, but basically anything that Donald Trump said or did for 4 years was horrifying. And he didn't post it and spoke out and emailed and in all ways that made me not one microscopic bit less of a patriotic American.
Exactly.
So in the same way, I'm a proud Jew. And yet I really find some of Benjamin Netanyahu's policies to be abhorrent and offensive.
Yeah. And look, we are absolutely the biggest critics on what is happening to people in the LGBTQ plus community in Israel now, just like here, is horrifying and should not stand. And thankfully, people are protesting and speaking out.
And the judiciary and African immigrants and let's not go down that rabbit hole. I want to pivot. Black Jewish relations have been around for decades and decades, and there are a lot of young people who are unaware of the Jewish community's early and steadfast support for the civil rights and voting rights movements. You just spoke at the 60th anniversary, and so did Jonathan Greenblatt, the 60th anniversary of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech and the March on Washington. So talk about both that axis, that coalition, as well as what it was like to speak at that historic location, and just talk about that whole event.
So I am still on a high from that, I will say. First and foremost, it was one of the most powerful experiences of my life. Just forget even speaking, participating in that, and then having the opportunity and being asked to speak. So one, my 15-year-old was with me, and to have her see history in real life and something she has learned about, and to be on the same stage on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and speaking out against the hate and extremism we're seeing, and why we need the coalition work, as you're referring to. So Black Jewish relations has been, has ebbed and flowed throughout the years. And we, as a Jewish community, have not also done a very good job of welcoming Jews of color. And that is, they really should be uplifted because they sit in both camps in many respects. And the work that can be done together. So being asked to be part of the March on Washington, and Jonathan Greenblatt, as you mentioned, our CEO and National Director, has an incredible relationship with the King family and also with Reverend Sharpton, who runs the National Action Network, and working with them together with organizations like the Urban League and a lot of the Black fraternities and sororities. It was a way to bring back to life what happened 60 years ago. ADL was there 60 years ago, and now we were there again. And there's been times throughout history where we've certainly had friction, but this was a way to show, if we want to fight anti-Semitism, we need to fight all forms of hate, because we have seen that a lot of the hate and extremism is rooted in anti-Semitism, and then it leads to other forms of hate. So we need to be allies, and we need to have allies. And that is really, this is, I would call it almost like a new kickoff in a way for us in our communities to be doing more work together than against each other and finding that common ground again. It was amazing.
I bet. Just a little factoid that I think a lot of people either never knew or forgot, but Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney, the three young men who were murdered in the South to do voter registration, two of them were Jewish.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I have two more things before we go to the fast and wrap up. What is one thing you would like everyone to know about Jews, about the Jewish community?
We are not I would say we're not a monolith. Everybody thinks we all act the same, we all look the same. We are so different, and it is what is so incredible and just fascinating about Jewish people. And I would sit down and talk with people from all different backgrounds. We all come from so many backgrounds, our history, where we all came from, where we all live today throughout the world. And there are only 15 million Jews worldwide. That is something people do not realize.
I think that's a brilliant answer. I wasn't sure what you would say. I love that answer. That's the old joke, 2 Jews, 3 opinions.
Exactly. Probably more than 3.
That's probably true. The last thing, Meredith, we're taping this and we're going to be airing this right before the high holidays, the holiest days of the year for the Jewish community, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Can you do a 30-second overview of why those days are so important and what non-Jews might want to know or non-observant Jews might want to know about the holiness of those days?
Yeah, so I call it like a rebirth. It's a way of reframing. So Rosh Hashanah is the Jewish New Year and Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement. To me, as somebody who my faith is a huge part of my life and actually going to services, it is a way to renew and to start afresh. And whatever happened the past year, you take a deep breath, which is what I do actually on Yom Kippur. I stand there when we're in a certain part of the service, I take a deep breath and, okay, what can I do better this year? What can I let go? Because I've made mistakes and everybody makes mistakes. And how can I move forward? That to me is a huge part of why Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are so important.
We also ask forgiveness for our loved ones, friends, colleagues, anyone we have wronged. So Meredith, if I have wronged you or offended you in the past year, I ask you to forgive me.
Absolutely, of course, and I would say vice versa, and to anybody else watching this too. And that's what I mean by a rebirth. It is a way to refocus ourselves and understand what has happened throughout the past year.
Amazing. All right. Meredith Weisel, ADL, the Anti-Defamation League. It's time for the Fast Five. 5 quick questions, 5 quick answers. Question number 1. If you could have dinner with anyone, alive or dead, who would you choose?
Elie Wiesel.
Nice. The late author about the Holocaust, brilliant author. Question 2. What is your favorite Jewish-themed movie?
Oh my goodness. Probably the 10 Commandments, actually.
Okay.
With Charlton Heston.
Okay. Who's not holding a gun in the movie, right?
No, but it's a historical thing of watching it as a kid.
Okay. Question number 3. You're a runner, as you've already referenced. What's your favorite running path that folks who are runners may not have tried, maybe?
Probably the C&O Canal. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Good. Question 4. Is there something on your bucket list that you might like to share? Something that you really want to do and haven't yet done?
Oh, gosh, a full Ironman, but I'm not sure I'll be able to. And an Ironman is a swim, bike, run, and I've done half Ironmans. I just have not done a full. So maybe one day.
Maybe. I think that's crazy. Okay. Question number 5. Meredith Weisel, the Anti-Defamation League. What is your hidden secret superpower? What is a skill or talent you have, something you're really good at that most folks can't do?
I am super organized. And I say that meaning like I can go in and take anything unorganized and just get rid of the clutter and make it very, very organized. And I have friends who joke about me coming over to organize their pantries.
I was just going to say, come on over. How about
It's
my
a
dining
weird thing, but I love to do
project?
it.
That's awesome. That's a great skill. Great superpower. Well, Meredith, thank you for making the time to chat today. And thank you for all you do and for your extraordinary career of being in the community and making a difference. It's always great to see you and talk with you.
Thank you so much for doing this and for just amplifying the work that we are doing to try and, as I would say, fight hate for good.
There you go. Look forward to seeing you soon. L'Shana Tova. May it be a sweet, happy, and healthy new year.
You too.
Thanks. Bye.